lesbian mafia. I guess I'm here to say that I am aware it has been 5 months since I've posted a podcast, and I'm supposed to be podcasting. I'm aware. However, I do have to tell you that, I started working part-time, so I don't have the same kind of time to edit, so there's that. And, well, let me just say, after the last podcast, I did have a couple of conversations, and how do I say this? I'm driving, by the way. I'm on my way home. I went to visit one of my girlfriends in the city. I was just thinking about the podcast on my way home now, so I just said, let me record this on my iPhone, which is probably tacky because I haven't posted. So you think I would get on the mic and do a proper podcast here, but I'm not. I'm sorry. But this is, I guess, raw and unfiltered because I'm just talking. I don't know if that made any sense or if I'm being too hyper focused on what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so, all right, what was I saying? Oh, after I did the last podcast, I did have a couple of conversations, and so, I'm a little bit more aware of what's happening in the podcasting world right now. So, it's just podcasting companies and some assorted other things. I'll leave it at that. What am I trying to say? So, I would not have a problem signing on with a podcast company, but the problem is the contract. That is the problem. You see, so I am not going to take talking points and then I have to curb the things I want to talk about. I have to change the stuff. I could do potentially a weekly podcast, right? And I really find fucking editing beyond annoying, but I could do it if I was going to be compensated properly and I could live like a human being, you know what I mean? But it's just too hard to just sign your entire life away and then I'm going to be miserable. So then the thing that started as something so fun and, it was at such a strange point in my life, but I had this kind of fun podcast that I would do with all my girlfriends, and we all had a fucking blast doing that show, right? Because we were anonymous. We were able to say whatever the fuck we want. Nobody had to worry about their jobs. You know what I mean? Nobody had to worry about their careers or their job. It was so fucking fun. Unfortunately, I think that was kind of a moment in time because, okay, so I was saying, I don't have a problem doing a podcast for a podcasting company. I wouldn't have a problem doing that, but I think I do have a problem if you're going to tell me I have to interview certain people and then I have to have this kind of attitude. I have to change and then there's all of the unspoken stuff that you're going to have to change if you're working for some Uber.
Watch out, vehicle on shoulder ahead.
Sorry. So I just I feel it's a betrayal to me. It's a betrayal to the podcast, to the Lesbian Mafia podcast. It's a complete and utter betrayal. And then you say to yourself, well, you grow up and you got to do things that you don't, but I don't want to fucking desecrate the Lesbian Mafia. I'm sorry, but to me, I've never heard a funnier fucking podcast than fucking the Lesbian Mafia back in the day. And I don't want to destroy that. I don't know if it's the right thing to do. So I've just taken, since I had those conversations 4 or 5 months ago, I said, let me get a fucking job and just stop it's just money all outgoing. So I just kind of wanted to, because there's nothing incoming. And it's been like this for a very long time, but I've been okay for, a couple decades, I'd say. And I was living on inheritance, but it's not going to last for the rest of my life. So I am going to need an income. So I guess ultimately what I'm saying is I do not know when and how much I will be able to do the podcast because I am working now and it's part-time. So that doesn't leave a lot for podcasting. If we didn't have to make an income, then I would podcast. But it does take a lot out of me. And then to sit down and then try to figure out, okay, you're doing a podcast. I'm talking low because I'm in the lobby. It's like 1:30, so I don't want to be loud. Nobody can hear me, but I don't know. So, yeah, so that's the story Morning Glory, I guess. So I don't know when I'm going to be podcasting or how or what I'm going to do. It's really, I think, too hard for me to think about signing a contract where I'm going to end up wanting to fucking shoot myself. That I signed something where I have to interview never mind. I'm not even going to get into it, but I am not interviewing your little pets. I'm not doing that. I'm just not. And I'm not going to talk up your sick LGBTQ shit. I'm just not going to do that. I'm sorry. So that's the story, Morning Glory. So I do have a little something here with Erin Kimberly, has been a delight. And so I guess I'll just post that for now, and I guess I will update you more as time goes on. And I'm really sorry. I have gotten a couple of emails, and I'm really sorry for just kind of, I don't know what, being a disappointment, where I'm like, yeah, I'm back. And then it's like, oh, you're doing that shit again where you're disappearing. You know what I mean? So I just kind of wanted to touch base and just tell you that I don't know what's happening, and I'm just kind of going with the flow. I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. But all right, I do love you listeners, the ones that really have been around for a long time and that I hear from, wow, that's amazing. But I don't know. Anyway, all right, I'll tell you more as I know more. Okay, you could always write into me at info@thelesbianmafia. I do tweet and post on Blue Sky. So, because one of my girlfriends, she had an amazingly successful YouTube channel, and she basically retired off of that. I mean, whatever. She's also an author. She writes books and stuff, but I guess what I'm trying to say, she told me, keep a lifeline on Twitter at least. So I am doing that. I am keeping a lifeline there because it is much easier to just, if you're at the gym, you just pull out your phone and you tweet. Or if you're about to fall asleep in bed, you start tweeting. If you do want to tune in, tap in, whatever, you could get me there too.
Hi, Sandi.
Erin Kimberly.
How are you?
I'm pretty good, I think. I'm very excited to be talking to you again.
I'm excited to be talking to you again as well. It's always a good time.
So, does this sound better to you? I think we sound better to each other right now.
I think so. It's a little more clear.
Yeah, next time maybe we'll even do a Zoom or something. Maybe eventually I'll just get on camera and bite the bullet. But
nice to see your face.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about social media. All I see now is men berating women and then women berating men. And then it gets into this weird, inter-ethnic relations. You've seen that stuff too, where,
Like every possible conflict that could happen is being escalated, and against women and religions against one another and the left versus the right. So every possible ideological divide is being intensified, and we're fighting over all of these things.
And so these people who are doing this on the internet, they're all just paid they are paid, right, to do this stuff? You would agree?
I think there are paid individuals that are on social media for the purpose of stirring things up, or bots. They don't even have to use individuals anymore. They can just program these bots that stir people up and troll different accounts. And
yeah,
public messaging by our politicians in previous years has been one of unification. And, that prime ministers, they were elected and they would say things like, I'm everybody's prime minister, whether you voted for me or not. I'm the prime minister of this country, and my goal is to unify and really promoting a pluralistic society and getting along with one another as neighbors, unified together. And those aren't the messages we're hearing from any of our politicians right now. Everything is so divisive, and politicians are choosing sides and seem to be intentionally stirring things up.
Yeah, so is it just to distract us from whatever economic stuff that they're doing, you think?
They're obviously benefiting from the instability they're creating in one way or another.
Yeah, for sure. So I saw several articles about how, let me just Google it really quick. Yeah, there was several articles that I saw where they're talking about how there's a dominance of right-wing content in the media ecosystem, let's say, like podcasting, video, YouTubers, this kind of thing, that they're saying that there's been a lot of right-leaning online shows and that it's disproportionate. So they're trying to promote more left-leaning. It's never just left-leaning. They're always radical left. It's always, to the wall, like beyond belief. How left? You can't even believe how left-wing they are. It's not even left-wing. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
But so I think I might have sent you that link last week.
Yeah, and I took a look at that, and I kind of wondered, how are they defining far right? Because there's so many talking points now that, if you just say that biological sex is real, that's considered a far right position. And that's the first thing I wondered. How are they defining what counts as far right? Because I've always been a left-leaning voter, and I feel completely left behind by left-wing politics. But the other thing is, with our media being so tightly controlled by our liberal government right now, that pushes all discourse online. So user-created content is the only way that we can share ideas that are being blacked out by our mainstream media. So I do think we're probably seeing a different kind of content escalating online in response to the tight controls on mainstream media.
Yeah, so there's also a lot of stuff happening on both sides of the aisle in terms of curtailing language, I think. Yeah, but I don't know, like after the last podcast I did, I can't remember exactly what I was talking about. I think I dug into the trans stuff, and I did notice a heavy, I don't want to say pile-on, but I don't know what you would call it. Like they're not attacking me necessarily, but they're attacking the content.
There's not a lot of room on the topic to broaden the conversation, is there? Because as soon as you start saying anything against this current narrative, people immediately pile on.
And they don't even necessarily hate the person. They don't hate you necessarily, because I didn't feel like it was directed at me personally, let's say. Some of it was, but it's the conversation. They want to control the conversation, and if they lose even an inch of the conversation, they really go into overdrive.
Yeah. It does make me nervous because obviously, I've been living as a trans man for 20 years of my life. Mm-hmm. I obviously care about my safety and well-being and my ability to just live peacefully in society. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that there are people who support that. I think what we're sadly missing is any alternative framework in which I can continue to do that is divorced from this extremism. And when we can't envision that, I think that does cause people anxiety because they think it's all or nothing. They think we either fall in line with this popular narrative that's going around, or it's genocide, right? Or it's
right.
The crumbling of trans rights and my ability to live my life. And maybe one of the advantages I have is I'm old enough to remember a time when I lived as a trans man and these politics didn't exist. It hasn't always been this way. These are new ideas. Mm-hmm. And we were doing just fine without these ideas. So I'm trying to build sort of a new vision and a new stable ground that we can stand on as trans people that isn't based on these ideas. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It doesn't have to be we all get on board with this and cancel anyone that dares speak against it.
I used to think it was lack of information, and a lot of it was, but there's a lot of it that isn't. There are people who have even more of it than I do, but they still choose to speak against a little bit of sanity in this conversation. Like, since the last time we spoke, you started, what would you call it? Because I know that there's also controversy about what we call podcasts now, like video isn't supposed to be called podcast, I think. I don't want to make anyone upset, but.
Well, I'm podcasting it too, so it's.
Oh, you are?
YouTube. It's called the Bearded Lesbians podcast. It's on YouTube, but it's also on the podcast apps.
And so do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you've been doing on there?
Sure, I am talking to any lesbian that is ever medicalized, regardless of what words she or he uses. Some of them identify as trans men and use he, him pronouns. Some have medicalized, but they still consider themselves butch lesbians. Some are detransitioners who regret their decision to take testosterone. So I'm just looking at all of it as a whole category, that they are lesbians, they're same-sex attracted females who have chosen to masculinize their appearance with testosterone. And I'm just having open sex realist conversations with them and just having open conversations about all of it.
So sex realist means someone who doesn't deny male and female exists, right?
Correct. For why that persists into adulthood.
What leads to it in childhood?
Well, it's a fairly common experience, especially for the gay boys mostly, but some gay girls also experience this sense of incongruence or cross-sex identification. That is just thought to be a fairly normal aspect of the psychological development of homosexuality. Usually when they reach adolescence and their sexuality wakes up and they realize, okay, I'm a girl that's attracted to girls, and that sense of incongruence then gets integrated into a meaningful lesbian identity in most cases. Some of the risk factors for why that doesn't resolve that have been studied, I mean, there's no objective measures, not like we can do a blood test to know for sure when we're meeting and assessing these young people who's going to persist and who isn't, but there are some factors that have been known to correlate with persistence. So those are things like extreme homophobia, family dysfunction where parents, for whatever reason, weren't able to provide a good, stable environment for the kid growing up. Could be, a mother with a mental health issue or medical issue. And socioeconomic stress and autism is one of the known factors. They just don't have the cognitive flexibility because of their more black and white thinking. They don't have the flexibility to work that out and hadn't been aware of that research from 30 years ago. So
Right, because then after you transition, it's almost like they're lost. It's very hard to ever get them back, right? Once you've done these physical things to your body, you're way too invested in it. So the youth, do you think that should be the main focus for people? Because I always thought it was the schools, because they're getting into their heads very young, and the schools asking for pronouns and confusing them, and but maybe it's in the home, actually.
It's a lot of layers, I think. Yeah. And now, in terms of the kids that are coming to clinics, if they don't all have that classic childhood onset gender identity disorder, I think that they're actually the minority. We now have this whole new cohort of kids coming in because we're telling them they just get to identify however they want and run with that. So I think a lot of us, girls in particular, are jumping on that wagon.
Right.
Who never even had the classic textbook case of gender identity disorder. So yes, there's factors that in their household, in their environment growing up, in their own personal temperament, any mental health issues they have, or things like autism. And then you add that layer of what they're being taught in schools and what content they have access to online, including easy access to pornography, which I think is freaking a lot of the girls in particular out.
Yes, for sure. The porno is, it's unbelievable what is so easy to access. Like with 2 or 3 clicks, the shit that you can be exposed to, And again, like I don't have any problem. I know a lot of feminists hate that I say this, but like I don't really have a problem with porno, but Jesus Christ, what's out there now?
Something kids should have access to.
Yeah, exactly. But the way it is now, the way porn is, it's really very different. It's not sex. We're not seeing sex when we watch porn. I don't know what it is.
Introduced to kids even in the school system. Some of the books that are in the school libraries are like cartoon illustrated books of explicit sexual acts, like how to give a blowjob or how to have anal sex in elementary schools. And that is porn too. I define porn as a depiction of sexual acts completely devoid of any emotional bonding or relationship. And so by that definition, online they're seeing it in the video format, but in schools they're seeing that in, a cartoon graphic novel format. It's still porn. It's still depicting sexual acts completely divorced from emotional bonding or relationship. I can't imagine being a 5-year-old stumbling upon a book that's showing illustrations of how to give a blowjob. Why does a 5-year-old need access to that?
Right. I remember when I was really small, probably around that age, we lived in, my family, we lived in Washington Heights, which is Manhattan. It's considered Manhattan. And we would get just free cable. So you know what that means. And there was a channel, it was called Channel J. And I think her name was Robin Bird. I'm not sure. Are you aware of this person?
I'm not, no.
Okay, well, I mean, it was such crazy making chaos. And they would just, I have like a memory of watching this alone because I was just flipping through the channels. And then my mother came in and saw what I was watching and took it off. But I mean, the stuff that they call sexual freedom or empowerment, we all have different ideas of what that means. But for whatever reason, certain people think that their view should be the way that things should be. Like just because you have an opinion about something, you're the right opinion. But your opinion is the one that where they think their view is the right view and everyone else is wrong.
And I think a lot of people that support that kind of sexualized content for kids, thinking of the books in the school system, I think people imagine that is promoting sex positivity with kids. But that's not what we're actually seeing in the development of adolescence. I've worked with many adolescents. I specialized in youth mental health. And what we're actually seeing isn't a generation of young people engaging in healthy pair bonding and sexual relationships. What we're seeing is a whole generation of young people that are struggling to maintain and even initiate pair bonding or relationship because they're all online. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them aren't dating or engaging in any sexual activity at all. We're not seeing a generation of sexually liberated kids. We're seeing a generation of kids that are freaked out by the idea of sex, who aren't dating, who aren't having sex, who are engaging socially online rather than in person, and who are engaging in high-risk sex activities at an alarming rate, like anonymous hookups.
So that was with the advent of Tinder, I guess, that started?
Yeah, I mean, all those apps, right? And Grindr for the gay men.
Yeah, so Tinder was the straight version of Grindr.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't know if it ever really picked up the way Grindr did, Because I don't know if girls are they exactly into that? Just because most of the time they're not even being pleasured properly. I mean, I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know how many girls are, but I know a lot of young trans men are. They're female, but a lot of the young trans men are engaging in very high-risk sexual behavior.
Anonymous hookups?
Yes, there's been research on it. So they are engaging in higher than average high-risk sexual behavior. Trans men are more likely than trans women to have unprotected sex, higher rates of doing sex work amongst trans men. Unfortunately, I mean, because trans men are female, there's a lack. We don't have the reins of advocacy. We aren't really studied at the same rates that trans women are. So a lot of these studies that talk about how at-risk trans men are have to just kind of throw up their hands and say, well, there's so little data that we can even draw from about the trans men because no one's really been interested in studying them.
It makes sense, though, that they would be very hyper-sexualized, right, with the testosterone?
Yeah. Hypersexualized from the testosterone, it does increase our libido.
Right.
And I think emulating gay males, sort of the culture of promiscuity amongst gay men, so they get on Grindr and are trying to kind of act and fit in with the gay men and having hookups. But one of the things they don't realize is the number of straight men that fetishize young trans men end up on these Grindr sites too. And these young trans men think, oh, I'm in a gay relationship. It's like, no, you're not. You're actually hooking up with straight men who fetishize trans men.
Right. So these hookups are just basically straight. They're trans men who are hooking up with gay guys or straight men or something.
Yeah, I mean, that's never been my scene because I'm into women, but anecdotally, that's what I'm hearing from a lot of the trans youth that I have worked with in the past. A very high rate of them are being sexually assaulted.
Oh.
Because they will do things like, I don't think Craigslist has personal ads anymore, but that used to be a very anonymous way of hooking up with people in your local city. was to have a Craigslist ad that was anonymous. People then message you anonymously, and then they would have these completely anonymous hookups, and then we're getting sexually assaulted on those peds. Because I used to be an assessor for a lot of these girls. I did hormone readiness assessment. So I worked with a lot of these young people before they took testosterone. Mm-hmm. And when we look at that cohort of girls that was interested in medicalizing, it's a lot of very highly vulnerable, compromised young women who have histories of sexual trauma or grew up in the foster care system or have autism or ADHD, so they're very socially isolated.
Right.
So
oh my God.
They become these trans men, and they're still highly vulnerable. I mean, just putting these girls on testosterone doesn't make them any less vulnerable. And so if they're these lonely kids that have been sexually abused, they have a distorted view of what sexuality is, they're hungry for connection and love. And I think they're probably the ones that are ending up in these hookups and being repeatedly sexually abused because they're not keeping themselves safe.
Yeah, so that would be interesting to know. Is it because they're typical girls looking for attention and getting the wrong kind of attention and adding to the awful experiences that led them to even look for these experiences? Or are they hypersexualized because they're on testosterone?
Yeah, it's probably all of it. So when you think of just women in general who engage in high-risk sexual behavior, they exist. So women with maybe a borderline personality disorder or sexual abuse history, those are the women that tend to end up doing sex work. And so I think there's a huge overlap between why trans men are engaging in high-risk sexual behavior. If we think of them as women, because they're females, right? So they grew up as girls. They experienced things like sexual trauma as girls. So thinking of them as men really obscures all of this, right? So if we just think of them as a highly vulnerable cohort of young women, they're engaging in that high-risk behavior for the same reasons that any other woman would. Put testosterone on top of that, where their libido is through the roof, I think it adds to that problem.
Right. I wonder what that would actually do, because if they're not seeking it out specifically because they want to, like, quote unquote, get off, which I think is the male way that works, like the gay male way, like they just want to get off with some dude, and then it's over and then they go home, it's nothing. But am I overgeneralizing? Am I going to get in trouble for saying that?
I don't think you're overgeneralizing. I mean, there has been a wealth of research done into male sexuality versus female sexuality, and we're not wired the same. Male sexuality is a lot more about just, physical act, whereas female sexuality tends to be more relational. And that doesn't really change when we take testosterone. It increases our libido, but it doesn't completely rewire our motivations for having sex. I think trans men are still looking for more emotional bonding, but now have this libido that matches male libido. I think it can be very confusing.
Yes, right. And thank you for saving me in that. But so when your libido is crazy through the roof, you're probably already not making the best decisions. And then
it would be very sudden, wouldn't it? I mean, when boys reach puberty, boys are kind of notorious for their libido that's gone haywire and they don't know how to manage it. But that happens fairly gradually. It's not like all of a sudden they have this high dose of testosterone. Whereas the trans men do. They're injecting this testosterone. So all of a sudden they have all of this testosterone coursing through their veins. It's a very sudden change.
That's interesting and very, very confusing. Because each thing can stand on its own, right? Either just their libido's going nutty, or they're just like typical women who have been abused, likely, and now they're, overacting with sexuality.
Yeah.
So I guess you're saying it's probably a combination of both. But I find that so hard to even understand how both of them can work together. I find that weird. But it probably makes sense. But I just, for some reason, I don't know, I'm blanking out on that for some reason.
It's probably pretty confusing internally, too, for these young women turned trans men, where they have all of those layers of emotional needs and a desire to be wanted and appreciated and loved and bond with somebody, but then have this strong urge to just have sex.
Right, the physical need. That has to be torture. And I don't know, are they warned about that before they start shooting you up with testosterone, that this is going to be an insane level of need that you're going to have?
There isn't a lot of guidance. because they are supposed to warn us about risks. And so they may mention, oh, this could cause an increase in your libido, but there probably wouldn't be any further conversation about it. It would probably just be one of many things on the checklist that they inform a client about.
You know, it's interesting, Erin, because I'm always focused on young lesbians who will possibly be taken in by this. And I'm so worried, I have so much fear around that I don't really focus so much on, well, this is what it looks like after it has happened, after they've transitioned and then they're like, I don't really get into the details the way I think about just, oh God, let's not let more lesbians get pulled into this.
One of the pieces that a ball that I've picked up, because I'm heading into grad school and I'm looking at this through a feminist framework and do feminist analysis on what's happening with trans men. It's so necessary that we need to be researched. It needs to be research from a sex-based perspective. And I've been looking at surveys, because there have been several huge surveys on thousands of trans people throughout North America, and studies, papers being written. But it's been difficult to parse out the sex of the participants, because if they say trans men or trans women, that I can tell what the biological sex is. But there's so many of these new identity categories, like non-binary now, that if they have stats about 30% of non-binary people experience X, Y, and Z, I can't do a sex-based analysis of that, because I don't know what sex a non-binary person is. And a lot of the reporting that gets done in these papers, they make these huge blanket statements about 60% of trans people, X, Y, and Z, and they're not dividing that out by sex.
Right.
Oh,
my God.
If they make a claim that, and I'm pulling this out of there, so this isn't a real stat, but let's say they say 80% of trans people are suicidal. Well, that could be 70% trans men and the rest trans women. So there's no sex-based analysis happening. When I've been able to parse out the sex and analyze that from a sex-based perspective, I am seeing trends that trans men continue to experience the exact same forms of sex-based oppression as any other woman. That doesn't change when we take testosterone. So things like sexual assault, trans men are far more likely to be sexually assaulted than trans women, because it's sex-based. That's sex-based oppression. So no one's really looking at it from that perspective. And so that's the work that I want to do.
Which is actually valid, because all you ever hear about, and I might not even include this because I'll probably get beheaded for this, but all I ever heard about, and this is going back, I want to say about 15 years, the conversation around this with the male to female transgenders, all they ever talked about is how they were sexually assaulted. And then sometimes they would even say they were sexually assaulted by women, which, whatever. But there was such a big conversation around that. What are your thoughts on that? And were you aware of that? I'm sure you were.
I mean, in these papers that I'm looking at, they do also report on trans women being sexually assaulted, but the trans women have the reins of the entire narrative, the entire agenda. We never hear from the trans men. So the trans women are often, throwing out these stats about how hard it is for them, that they're being sexually assaulted, they're being murdered, they're being kicked out of their homes, they're experiencing violence or poverty. But all of those stats show that those things happen more to trans men than trans women.
Who we never hear about.
We always hear about the trans women, right? In every platform, it's prioritizing the voices of trans women and how hard they have it, and we're not really thinking about researching or talking about the trans men.
It's so weird, because every time I talk to you, I feel like, oh my God, there's so much more, right?
Yeah. My focus over the next while through the work that I'm going to do through academia is focusing on the trans men, but like I said, but focusing on them from a sex-based perspective. And I hope to persuade more and more of them to adopt principles of feminism and see that that's to their advantage.
Yeah, and let me say something, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I think if you do attach it more to women, that you might have a little bit more eyeballs on it, because people don't have any idea what a quote-unquote trans man is. They're not very interested. For some reason, the male to female transgenders, they're fucking fascinated by these men, right? Because they're men. Yeah. So, and they have the floor for, they love transgenders, right? But it's never a male to female. That nobody wants to hear about. Nobody cares to hear about it. Nobody's interested.
The female to male.
Yeah. Is that something you've noticed?
That's absolutely something I've noticed at all levels of this. So when things were being debated by our government, they lined up a bunch of trans women to talk to and weren't the least bit interested in talking to me. So in the media, it's always the trans women that are being platformed, not trans men.
Right. And that hasn't changed over, at least in America, this issue became more mainstream over the last 15 years. It's always men, male to female, you know?
And when you take it from a sex-based perspective, that's obvious, isn't it? That the men are being platformed, the men have the reins of the politics, the men are the ones being researched, they have all the power.
Right, because they're men, so.
Yeah.
And so when you hear some like liberal person on the internet or some political person talking about this and they have no clue what they're talking about, and then they're calling us bigots because we're having this conversation, and transphobe and all the other all these words. How are we supposed to respond? You just keep talking? Or, because sometimes I feel like, how much can we talk? Because I just saw, I just saw a YouTube of this woman, some VP or something high up in NPR. And then she said, and I'll include it in the show notes, but she said, I think we've come to a place with truth where that's not really, that helpful anymore. That was kind of what she was saying. And I'm saying this is NPR, National Public Radio, taxpayer-funded radio. And so she's telling us that the truth isn't really where we should be going. Like, truth is a problem. I don't know. That's how I took it.
It's this postmodern view that there is no such thing as an absolute truth. That comes out of postmodernism, that truth is relative and then it prioritizes this thing called lived experience, that your subjective experience of the world is what matters. And then that prioritizes, it's the oppression Olympics, right? That prioritizes the lived experiences of those who've been oppressed. So it's all part of postmodernism. But this idea that there is no such thing as truth.
Right. So where do you go from there?
Well, back to your comment about, having the conversation. I think that, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to lose my job or lose all my friends and be canceled. But I think we're reaching a critical tipping point where enough people are seeing the problem and are getting upset enough about it that if enough of us start speaking, we're not cancelable anymore. I think we're getting close to that point where people are fed up enough that enough people are going to start speaking. Yes, I'm glad that people care about trans people, but every other letter of that alphabet also matters. And the problem with this melting pot, so they say, the more people we bring into this melting pot, we're going to be united and stronger because there's power in numbers, which is true, but the consequence of it is we've lost our ability to advocate for each of those letters of that alphabet individually. And so it's difficult for lesbians to just advocate for lesbians separate from the T. And it shouldn't be that way, right? We get to be allies to one another.
Right.
While still being invested in the best interests of each of those letters of the alphabet. So it doesn't have to be an either or. So Chaperone can be a great ally to trans people, but still be a great ally to lesbians because they're two completely different things.
Right, but being an ally to lesbians is never, even when they are lesbian.
Yes, and that's shameful, right? That it's, how is that benefiting lesbians then, being part of this alphabet?
Right, if all you're there for is to cape for male to female trans.
Yeah, I don't think lesbians necessarily realize what's at stake for them in terms of how this is playing out legally. Because up until a few years ago, we were all a community. I mean, trans men were still hanging out with lesbians. So we were engaging. We could be allies to one another. But the way this is being written into law is a serious threat to lesbians. And we don't have to be anti-trans to address that problem. We've talked a bit in the past about the loss of lesbian spaces. And you add to this whole problem, this self-ID laws that basically anyone can just proclaim which sex they are and they have to be treated as such. So that means any man, doesn't even have to be a trans woman, just any man with a big bushy beard and build of a lumberjack can walk into a lesbian bar saying, I self-ID as a lesbian.
Right.
legally, there can be no boundaries then between lesbians and men. So self-ID is, I think, the biggest problem. So we've talked about spaces, but there are far-reaching implications beyond just physical spaces. If lesbians cannot clearly define what a lesbian is. So we all commonly understood lesbians as women who are attracted to women.
Right.
And we all knew what a lesbian was. But by blurring what womanhood means, so saying, well, trans woman is a woman. If a trans woman is attracted to women, then she's also a lesbian, which means lesbians can't define themselves as a separate experience.
Right.
A woman born a woman who is attracted to women is a different experience than a man who transitions to become a woman and is still attracted to women. They're two completely different things. So aside from physical spaces, which in itself is a problem, it also means if I can't clearly identify what a lesbian is, I also can't do research about lesbians. One of the questions that you texted me that we could talk about is, what are the challenges facing lesbians? How can we support young lesbians? So what would that mean? So it would mean maybe some representation of lesbianism in popular media, some resources, better research on how young lesbians are doing. And we can't do any of that. If I can't define what a lesbian is, I can't even do a study about lesbians unless I include trans women.
Or even just women in general. You can't even do studies on women anymore.
Yeah. So if we were to do a study on, I don't want to cast us all in a bad light, but let's say, what are the rates of violent crime amongst women? Well, if I include trans women, that's going to skew all of my stats.
I just wish that I understood where lesbian women were going with this when they're just championing trans stuff, and then they don't even listen to you. They just automatically demonize you as a transphobe when you want to have these conversations, which are perfectly reasonable conversations. Like, I don't think either of us are bad people, right? Like, I don't hate trans people. I hate a lot of what's happening to women and lesbians.
Yeah. Trans needs to be advocated for as a completely separate thing than the L, the G, the B, all those other intersex, all those other letters. I mean, I have an intersex condition, and this impacts me too. Like, if we say that there are a billion genders and that sex isn't binary, then I don't have accurate information about my own intersex condition to sort that out. And I mean, I'm not a third sex, right? I'm not a 10th sex. I am female. I mean, I had testicular tissue, but there are only two sexes. Even for those of us with intersex conditions, if we define sex just by your reproductive ability, that's all sex is, right? Nothing more, nothing less.
Right.
And yes, I had both ovarian and testicular tissue. So some might say, oh, well, you're both sexes. Well, no, I'm not, because those two tissues can never be both viable at the same time in a single human being. One is always dominant and the other is always dormant. So in my case, I had a fully functioning ovary on one side and a hybrid ovary testicle on the other side called an ovotestes. That testicular tissue was producing testosterone, which virilized me, but it wasn't producing sperm. So if I was producing ova but not sperm, reproductively I'm female.
Yeah.
And there's never a case in any human being that both of those tissues are viable at the same time. If I can't think about biological sex and the differences between biological sex, I can't even understand my own medical condition. So this doesn't serve intersex people well either. Which
is the claim, right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, am I non-binary because I had an ovary and an ovotestes? Like, so some might say I am.
Right.
Right. But the way that I think about this, so I have a sex realist perspective. I believe biological sex is real. Yes, there are disorders of sex development, or what we used to call intersex conditions, where there are differences in how we develop, but there's still only male and female, and I don't feel threatened by that knowledge. What a trans person is, the way I have thought of my own transition over the years, is that this is a legal fiction. I mean, granted, legal status is male, but I'm not biologically male. I'm still biologically female. This was an accommodation for a handful of people who had a condition to improve our quality of life. If we think of it as a legal fiction, now we can negotiate the terms of that legal fiction that take into account biological sex. So, and there needs to be some limits. And I think we would all benefit from clarity on what that legal fiction looks like. That society grants me this opportunity. What does that mean? Does that mean I have access to all male spaces or just some male spaces? Or, right? And that can be negotiated and that can be informed by evidence. So on the, let's say, trans women in sports issue, we can respect the trans woman. I can continue to call her she. I can be concerned for her safety, well-being, and want dignity for her. But she's not biologically the same as a woman that was born a woman. She just isn't. And she's not alone in that. I mean, there are lots of different reasons for why women cannot compete in competitive sport against other women. Mm-hmm. A woman in a wheelchair does not compete against a woman who's not in a wheelchair. So there's lots of reasons for why people are excluded from certain categories that has absolutely nothing to do with diminishing their liberty or their humanity or their dignity. And that, to me, is just part of the legal fiction constraints, that there are some limits to what we can and can't do within this legal fiction. And I think we would all start to settle down if we were all clear about what that legal fiction meant, where society knows what to expect from us and we know what to expect, and we know what our responsibilities are to society. That should be part of the informed consent process. They should have a contract, and this should be informed by evidence. Do research on what are the biological differences between a trans woman and a woman, and in which competitive categories would you have an unfair advantage. And we can update this legal fiction as we study things more and have more clarity. But the actual contract should be something that I have to sign as a part of the informed consent process. And that's fair to me, not just society. That's fair to me to know exactly what it is I'm consenting to. If I think it is unreasonable and that it would cause me too much distress to live within those confines, then maybe transition isn't a good idea for me.
Right.
That should be part of the informed consent. Right? It's all about trans rights. And we're not really talking about, but what are our responsibilities? I always saw it as, when I transitioned, I thought, this is a gift. This is, like I said, the legal fiction that my society has granted me to live my life a little easier. I saw that as a privilege. And I saw it as my responsibility to do that in a way that is as ethically sound as possible, that I am not disrupting the world around me. It's my responsibility to learn how to adapt, to learn the social cues in order to fit into this new male role that I'm assuming, and do that in a way that is least disruptive.
I wish, I just want to get one more thing out of you, but that would have been a perfect place to end. I love that. But I wanted to ask you, well, I'm sure you haven't seen it. I'll send it to you afterward. But it's a video of, I want to say, like a young woman, and she's saying how, we're taking lesbian parties back. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a lesbian club renaissance happening. And I'm saying, really? Where is this what? What the fuck are you talking about? Renaissance is happening. They've diminished to almost zero, but okay. But she's saying, she's from New York, and she's saying that there's a place in Brooklyn that is lesbian. And then she said, but unlike the old lesbian places, they're not exclusive. Our new lesbian parties are inclusive. And then she was using lesbian and queer interchangeably, which is always ridiculous because men can do that, right? Do we agree that men can do that and still remain gay men, but lesbians cannot use queer interchangeably and remain lesbian? You just disappear. It's sorry, but that's what happens to you. But so she's using this, queer language, but then saying that it's a lesbian renaissance for bars and clubs. But
means any man can walk in and say, I'm queer.
Right. And then in the I think it was a TikTok, in that clip itself, there was a man on it was a guy dancing on the dance floor. And I'm just saying, like, are these girls even lesbian? Do they even know what a lesbian is, or do they just think that now being a lesbian means that you're queer? It means you're bisexual, or I don't really understand. And so is this just more propaganda and lies, or does this person really think that there is a lesbian renaissance happening?
I don't know what she's thinking, but I mean, and those places get to exist, right? I mean, it doesn't, people get so black and white in their thinking, all or nothing, that we either have to have all women's spaces are exclusively just for women or nothing, right? We can have some spaces that are just for women, and we can have some spaces that are mixed. So
Sure.
fine. I mean, open up a bar and call it a queer bar, and everyone's welcome. Those places get to exist, and lots of people will probably use that space and love that space. But I think it's also important for women who just want exclusive women's spaces, that needs to be permissible as well.
So I'll say when I used to go out to clubs and bars and, you go out dancing and stuff, I generally did hang out with more of my straight girlfriends, whatever, bi-curious, whatever they were straight pretty much. But, and we would go more or less to mixed places in the city. And I found those places had more energy. For whatever reason, a lot of the lesbian places, they were very low energy, I used to find. So I didn't really love the lesbian places. But when you're, single and on the market, I want to know, is there a lesbian that cares about this besides me and you?
A lot of them over on Twitter.
Well, I don't understand, why are we allowed to disappear and nobody thinks it's a good thing to, talk about this? That now we become the bad guys for saying, oh, hey, wait a minute, have you looked around? We don't even exist anymore.
Yeah. Well, the Michigan Women's Music Festival basically shut down over this issue, and there were other festivals. So what if there's one festival where trans women aren't allowed? It's for women only.
Right.
But there were other festivals, women's festivals, that were trans inclusive. So, I mean, there can be multiple spaces, and those that want to include trans women, awesome. Go have your festival and have a great time, and leave the Michigan women alone. It's
right.
Entitlement that they get to be involved in every single space is ridiculous.
And Mitch Fest closing was really fucking incredible. I've been wondering, wasn't her name Lisa Vogel?
Yes.
And where is she? Do we know where she is, this person?
She's still around. She's still active. Seems to be very involved in entertainment, organizing small events. And
do you know her personally or anything?
I've met her once, but I don't know her, no.
What do you think? She would ever talk to me maybe one day? I don't know.
I think she might, yeah.
Where do I find her? Lisa Vogel. I could find her maybe on Twitter.
I don't think she's on Twitter. She's on Facebook.
Facebook. So it's worth writing to her, you think? And
I think so.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to her.
Asking.
That's right. And if I get a rejection, that's fine. Yeah, so let me think. Hold on one second. I'm trying to think of how we can wind this down. I didn't even ask you not even one of the questions that I... Not even one. So what's a good way to close this off today? I don't know. I'm a little...
I guess I have a question for you, is how do you think the reception is going to be from your listeners to this conversation? And is there anything that we can kind of speak to them that will wrap things up?
I don't think the emotional reaction is ever good when I talk about this topic. It's never good. Ever. It's always a weird, and then I don't know, do you ever get this where you feel listeners or viewers are watching what you're doing and they want to wring your neck?
Oh yeah, all the time. I make liberal use of my block button.
So how do you deal with that emotionally when you know that they hate you or they hate what you're saying?
It can get hard. I mean, I'm in a weird position because I'm a trans man that admits that what that means is I'm a lesbian that medicalized, and so I'm sex realist, so I make all of the trans activists angry. But I have medicalized, so I don't always make the feminists happy, and nobody's happy with me. And there are, in all of those camps, there are reasonable people and there are nutcases. So the nutcases of all camps have come after me. I mean, the Christians think I'm a sinner, and the feminists think I'm a traitor, and the trans activists think I'm a traitor. And so, yeah, I get a lot of it from all sides, and it does get to be too much. And I have to be careful because there are times when the attacks get pretty intense. Sometimes they're coordinated attacks where camp will be unhappy about something I've done. So instead of just, coming to me, we're saying, hey, can I talk to you about political strategy? You said something I don't think is great strategy. Can we talk about it? That never happens. It's always these, coordinated groups getting together saying, okay, he's done something that's pissed us off today, so we need to do a takedown and a big Twitter storm and create a big smear campaign. And so that's how this tends to go. And it's hard because I'm a fairly mild-mannered person. I've never really been involved in trans politics. For me to step out and try to do the right thing and say what I'm saying and knowing that I'm pissing so many people off, I feel like I stand alone a lot because I'm not pure enough for any of those camps, right? I'm not a pure enough detransitioner. I'm not a pure enough trans person. I'm not a pure enough woman or a pure enough lesbian. Yeah. So none of the camps really find me politically convenient, and I end up pissing off all of them. But I've been finding it really helpful that I've returned to work. So I'm working full-time again, preparing to go to school again, and to counterbalance. And when we first started talking, I had left my job. I was a full-time activist at that point, and the financial strain of that, and just focusing on this day in and day out 24/7 was too much.
You kind of know how to mobilize yourself, and that's an amazing skill. I do not have that. Today I'll say, okay, I'm doing this. And then by tomorrow, some new thing is happening. And then I don't have the strength of focus. So I'm going to end up a cat lady. Maybe you'll find me. I'm going to end up.
I do like cats.
I wish we could have talked for another 3 hours because there's so much to talk about.
We'll just set up another time to chat.
That's right. We'll do this again. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Yes,
Take care.
Likewise. I just want to know, I have something to ask you, and I think I know the answer before I even ask. Do you use a French press? Do you make your coffee in a French press every day? I don't think you do, bitch. And it is very easy to clean. It's small. I make my coffee. It tastes delicious, so I drink a little bit of, what do you call them? Grains? I don't know what they're called. Are they called coffee ground? No, that's not. What's the right word? I don't know the right word. And I'm too lazy. Even though I have the computer right in front of me, I'm too lazy to look it up. Is it coffee grounds? That's the word, right? Anyway, am I supposed to care? Should I care? And honestly, I don't even know what to say anymore. Like, everybody just tries to lock themselves down. They try to sort out some type of partnership. A lot of them are mostly meeting people online. And then, they have to surf through all of these disgusting men on these apps. But then a lesbian, you just give her a girlfriend, whatever, they'll lock down for the next 25, 30 years. They don't give a fuck. I don't want to say that they isolate, but once they're partnered, they do kind of remove themselves from community, which has, I think, always been a weakness. I've done it myself. I understand it. And nobody even knows what the fuck is going on. They come out of a relationship 15, 20 years later, and they broke up with their girlfriend. They're all fucked up and devastated. Or they've been taking care of their sick puppy. Oh my God, does a lesbian love to foster sick fucking animals? Or does a lesbian love to foster sick fucking animals? Holy shit. So again, I don't know. The next generation, not even Z, the next generation beyond them, all they're inheriting is devastation. And we have left them with ruins. And we have left them with people as ruins. All of these young girls that have gone through these very complicated, awful surgeries. We're going to see how it's affecting their health in the coming years when you elongate or whatever it is that they do to your urethra. And you have some dude who became a surgeon and they elongate that urethra and it gets all fucked up. And they have to keep getting these corrective surgeries and the urethra is not coming back. This is how I'm coping. It's a little bit funny what's actually happening because it's so crazy. But anyway, thank you for listening. Ciao for now. Brown cow, take care, brush your hair.
Why don't women care about women no more? Too busy brawling in a gender war. Lesbians left, took the space station. LGBTQs on a Mars vacation.